Linda Hamilton was once the face of Hollywood's toughest woman, the actress whose performance as Sarah Connor in The Terminator defined an entire generation's idea of what female strength could look like on screen. But behind the camera, her own story was far darker than any role she played. At the height of her fame, she found herself swept into the orbit of James Cameron, the man the world adored as the king of Hollywood ambition. Their romance began like a fairy tale, but it soon turned into years of emotional chaos, a marriage that lasted barely 2 years, and a divorce settlement that shook all of Hollywood. Now, at 69, Hamilton looks back on the relationship that both captivated and nearly destroyed her, with revelations that continue to shock fans of classic cinema. Linda Carroll Hamilton was born on September 26, 1956, in Salisbury, Maryland. She came into the world as one half of a pair, an identical twin, her sister Leslie, born minutes before her. From the very beginning, that fact felt less like a blessing and more like a burden. Growing up, Linda hated being mistaken for Leslie with an intensity she could not fully explain. She went to extremes to prove they were not alike. She cut her hair differently, changed its color, altered her eyebrows. When none of that felt like enough, she turned to food, eating her way to 170 pounds in a bid to look nothing like the sister who shared her face. Behind that rebellion was something darker and deeper, a mind that didn't work the way other people's minds did, a current of instability that ran through her childhood and would shape everything that followed. She says she is haunted by a memory from when she was 5 years old. She remembers being found beating a puppy with a stick. She has carried that image for her entire life, not as an excuse, but as a kind of early warning sign, a glimpse of the person she was afraid she was capable of becoming. Her mother noticed that something was wrong and took her to see doctors. What nobody knew yet, what would go undiagnosed for decades, was that Linda Hamilton had bipolar disorder, a condition that would derail her marriages, her relationships, and her sense of self long before anyone put a name to it. By her late teens, she had abandoned any early dreams of becoming a firefighter or an archaeologist, the two careers that had captured her imagination as a child. She studied at the Strasberg Institute in New York, and then made her way to Los Angeles, arriving in the early 1980s with the kind of quiet determination that does not announce itself in advance. Her film debut came in 1979. Small roles followed. She was building something, though she could not yet see clearly what it was. The role that changed her life arrived in 1984. James Cameron, a young Canadian director who had already demonstrated a ferocious talent with Piranha 2 and had just completed The Terminator, cast Linda as Sarah Connor, a young waitress who discovers she is the mother of humanity's future savior and must survive a relentless machine sent from the future to kill her. The film was made on a modest budget and released with modest expectations. It became something no one had anticipated, a cultural phenomenon. Linda Hamilton, almost overnight, became one of the most recognized faces in American cinema. Sarah Connor was not simply a character, she was a symbol, a new kind of woman on screen, and Linda had created her from the inside out. But success, as she would come to understand over and over again, had a way of arriving at the same time as chaos. At the time The Terminator was released, James Cameron was married to Gail Ann Hurd, one of the film's producers and the woman who had co-written the screenplay with him. He had already been married once before that to Sharon Williams from 1978 to 1984. Linda and Cameron crossed paths on the set of The Terminator, but the romantic connection between them came later, during the production of the sequel. In 1987, Linda landed the role of Katherine Chandler in Beauty and the Beast, a CBS television series that ran for 3 seasons and earned her a Golden Globe nomination and an Emmy nomination. It was the kind of sustained success that proved that Terminator had not been a fluke. But when she fell pregnant during the show's 3rd season, she asked to be written out. The father of that child was actor Bruce Abbott, whom she had met in 1980 on the set of Tag, the assassination game. He had played a psychopath trying to kill her. They had married in December 1982. It should perhaps have been a sign. The marriage to Bruce Abbott was a chapter Linda has since described with unflinching honesty. Her bipolar disorder, still undiagnosed at the time, was making her difficult to live with in ways she could not control or understand. She would pick fights deliberately, screaming and blaming him for things that had nothing to do with him. After a miscarriage during their marriage, the disorder tightened its grip. She has said publicly that Abbott eventually left her while she was pregnant with their son Dalton, born in 1989, and that his reasons for leaving were legitimate ones. 14 years later, in 2004, Linda publicly apologized to Bruce Abbott for the physical and emotional abuse that her undiagnosed condition had caused him to endure. It was one of the most honest things any actress in Hollywood had ever said about a failed marriage. By 1991, Cameron had divorced Kathryn Bigelow, the filmmaker he had married in 1989, a marriage that ended in part because of his growing closeness with Linda during the production of Terminator 2. Linda has acknowledged, without particular pride, that their workplace romance was the last straw for Bigelow, who filed for divorce while Cameron and Linda were becoming inseparable on set. Terminator 2: Judgment Day was released in the summer of 1991 and became one of the highest-grossing films ever made at that time. Linda's transformation for the role she had trained ferociously, stripping herself down to a lean, muscular figure that shocked audiences who remembered the relatively soft Sarah Connor of the first film, was one of the most discussed physical preparations in Hollywood history. She has admitted that she went too far. Cameron encouraged her, pushed her, and she pushed herself beyond what was healthy, suffering 2 miscarriages that she has attributed in part to the punishing physical regimen. Nobody told her to stop. Nobody told her it was enough. On February 15, 1993, their daughter, Josephine Archer Cameron, was born. For a moment, it seemed like the turbulence might settle. It did not. What Linda Hamilton has said about life with James Cameron in the years since paints a portrait of 2 people who were passionately drawn to each other and fundamentally unsuited in ways neither of them could fix. She has described their relationship as a mystery, not just to the outside world, but to both of them. That relationship was a mystery to all of us, even Jim and myself, because we are terribly mismatched, she told the New York Times. I used to say we fit together like a puzzle. Everywhere he's convex, I'm concave. Cameron was, and remains, one of the most controlling, demanding directors who has ever worked in Hollywood. On set, he was a man who expected everything and accepted nothing less. That quality, which made his films technically extraordinary and emotionally punishing to produce, did not turn off when he went home. Linda has said, in a moment of candor that surprised people who expected bitterness, that she actually found his controlling nature attractive at first. It made her feel stronger, she said. His authority, his certainty about what he wanted, appealed to something in her that was looking for a fixed point. She saw his tantrums, eventually, as evidence of vulnerability, a child having a tantrum, and that perspective allowed her to open her heart to him. But by the time they were living together and raising Josephine, Linda was, by her own account, spiraling out of control. Her bipolar disorder was at its worst. She was self-medicating with alcohol and prescription drugs. She was fighting him constantly, fighting everything about his life. She is described having hallucinations about her children, walking out of the house, unable to stop her mind from generating violent images of them being hurt. She felt, during the lowest periods, like she was going to die. "I felt like I was going to die," she said later, "that I was just going to lay on the floor and let go and let it all go." She was not diagnosed with bipolar disorder until 1995. By then, she and Cameron had already been living in the particular kind of damage that comes from years of untreated mental illness, meeting the enormous, relentless pressure of life alongside the most ambitious filmmaker in Hollywood. They married on July 26, 1997. The wedding came after years of an on-again, off-again relationship. Years that included Cameron's brief involvement with actress Susie Amos during a break that he and Linda had agreed to take. Cameron had met Amos on the set of Titanic, which he was directing at the time. He began a relationship with Amos while he and Linda were on their break, and then left Amos to go back to Linda, and they married. Then when he got together with Susie, I changed my mind, and he came back to me, and we got married, Linda said later, with the weary clarity of someone recounting something that makes less sense the more she examines it. Then he felt terrible about what he'd done to her and went back to her. Titanic was released in December 1997, 5 months after their wedding. It became the highest-grossing film in history, eventually earning Cameron 11 Academy Awards in a single night, a record it shares with Ben-Hur and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. He stood at the podium and declared himself the king of the world. At home, what he had left behind was a wife with a newborn daughter, a newly diagnosed mental illness, and the particular loneliness of being married to someone whose attention had been entirely consumed by the biggest film anyone had ever made. Titanic took Cameron completely, utterly, away from everything that was not itself. Linda has used a specific phrase to describe what Titanic did to her marriage. She told the Lady magazine, "Titanic was the mistress he left me for." She has elaborated on this in other interviews, saying he was the kind of man who would rather be at work with a mistress than at home with a wife. The film consumed him in a way that she came to understand, eventually, was simply his nature, not a betrayal of her specifically, but a fundamental truth about who he was. He was a man for whom the work was everything, and anyone who shared his life had to accept being second to it. Linda could not. There is a particular pain in being left not for another person, but for a thing. Another person, at least, is fallible, is knowable, can be competed with or understood. A film, a massive, all-consuming, historically successful film that won 11 Academy Awards and made its director the most celebrated filmmaker on the planet, is not something you can argue with. Linda Hamilton was home with her daughter, while James Cameron was somewhere at sea making history, and she was already, as she has said, not well. The divorce was finalized on December 16th, 1999. It had been 2 years and 5 months since the wedding. The settlement awarded Linda $50 million, half of Cameron's earnings from Titanic at the time of their split, a sum that made their divorce one of the most expensive in Hollywood history. She later said with characteristic directness that she had simply asked for her fair share, and he had agreed. The agreement and the money were the clean part. The rest was not clean at all. It's interesting, she told the Daily Mail in 2010, because while he was making Titanic, Susie at that time was the gargoyle on the end of my bed, waiting to swoop in. Now I'm the gargoyle on her bed, because for Jim, the one who doesn't end up with him is always the one he wants. I'm the one who got away, and she has to live with that. It was a remark of extraordinary self-possession from a woman who had been through the kind of marriage that destroys people, and who had chosen instead to understand it clearly. Cameron married Susie Amos in 2000 and remains married to her. It is, notably, the only one of his 5 marriages that has lasted. Linda has made her peace with the mathematics of that, in her own way. After the divorce, Linda Hamilton rebuilt herself slowly, in the way that people who have actually hit bottom do. Not quickly, not dramatically, but piece by piece. She has been sober for many years. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 1995 and eventually found a treatment regimen that worked. She left Malibu for a farmhouse in Virginia and then relocated to New Orleans, putting physical distance between herself and the life she had been living. She has spoken about the years after the divorce with the kind of language people use when they are describing survival. She grappled. She struggled. She eventually realized she had assumed she would simply move on to the next relationship, as if that were a required part of her identity. It was not. She did not. I've been celibate for at least 15 years, she said in an interview with ET Online, with the ease of someone who has long since made peace with a fact that might shock other people. She described loving her alone time. She said she had found something in solitude that she had never found in any of the relationships. It was like no one she had ever met, she said. Herself, finally, was the person she had been looking for. She kept working in the projects that interested her. She appeared in Chuck and Dante's Peak. She stayed in the public eye without courting it. And then, in 2019, she picked up the phone when James Cameron called. On the 3rd call, when he finally mentioned it was about work, and returned to the role of Sarah Connor in Terminator: Dark Fate. She said it took her a while to decide if she had anything more to give the character. She did. The film reunited her with Arnold Schwarzenegger, her co-star from the original, and with a director she had once married and divorced, and learned eventually to regard with a complicated but clear-eyed equanimity. "We don't talk at all," she said of Cameron, simply and without drama. She had ignored his calls until the 3rd one, when he finally mentioned it was about work. That detail, the 3 calls, the silence before the practicality, says more about where they ended up than any of the longer statements either of them has made in interviews. In 2025, at 68 years old, Linda Hamilton appeared in the 5th and final season of Stranger Things on Netflix, playing Dr. K, a villainous military researcher. She had been considering retirement before the show's creators, the Duffer Brothers, personally called to express how much they wanted her involved. She said she had been a fan of the series. She said she wasn't sure how to be a fangirl and an actress at the same time, and that she planned to work on it. The season premiered in November 2025 to enormous viewership. It was, by any measure, a remarkable late chapter for a woman who had spent decades being defined by one role and had spent just as long fighting to exist outside of it. In 2026, Linda Hamilton is 69 years old. She has been alone by choice, and she has been, by her own repeated account, at peace with the shape her life has taken. She has 2 children, Dalton, her son with Bruce Abbott, and Josephine, her daughter with James Cameron. Josephine has grown up largely away from the spotlight, a deliberate product of a mother who understood what the spotlight cost. The story of Linda Hamilton and James Cameron is in the end the story of 2 people who found each other in the crucible of making something extraordinary and discovered, too late, that the thing that drew them together was also the thing that made living together impossible. He was the work. The work was always going to win. And she was the woman who finally understood that loving someone who prioritizes the work above all else means being always in second place. She does not describe herself as a victim. She never has. She has described herself instead as someone who lived something fully, paid for it fully, and came out the other side knowing exactly what she wanted, which turned out to be silence, solitude, sobriety, and the particular freedom that comes from no longer needing to be in a love story at all. She got away, and it turned out to be exactly what she needed. Her twin sister Leslie died on August 22nd, 2020, at the age of 63, taking with her the one person who had shared Linda's earliest self, the childhood she had spent running from, the face she had spent years trying to make unrecognizable. Leslie had appeared in Terminator 2 as Hamilton's double in the scene where the T-1000 transforms into Sarah Connor. There is something quietly poetic in that. The sister she had once hated, resembling, preserved forever in the most famous film of Linda's career, playing her. By the time Leslie died, Linda had made peace with all of it. The face, the twinship, the illness, the marriages, the divorce, all of it. What do you think of Linda Hamilton's courage in speaking about the truth of her marriage to James Cameron? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.